Hello and welcome to the What Women Want Today podcast. You might be asking yourself right about now, well, what do women want? I mean, we're pretty complex creatures, right? Well, I think we want it all, and I'm here to explore it with you. My name is Terry Kellums. I'm your host. Go grab your favorite beverage. I've already got my glass of wine, and let's get started. Hello and welcome to this week's episode of What Women Want Today podcast. This is Terry Kellums, your host, and I'm very happy to be with you today. Today, I am revisiting a conversation I had with my friend and podcast host, Dena T. Dina and I had an IG Live conversation. Well, it's been quite a while ago, and we talked about the messy middle. So oftentimes on the podcast, I interview guests who share their story of their pivot and what led them to it and where they are today. However, I don't always spend a lot of time talking about what happens in the messy middle. So today you will hear Dina and I talk about grief, imposter syndrome, growth, what it feels like to make changes, and how in the messy middle you can go from feeling very competent to feeling like you're back at ground zero. You feel like you don't have the level of confidence that you had in your previous role sometimes. Dina and I also talk about how growth doesn't come without difficulty and discomfort. So I'm glad you're here with us today. I thank you for being here. Now let's join the episode. All right, so I'm so glad to have you join me today, Dina. Do you want to do a quick introduction of yourself so everybody that's watching knows who you are, my lovely friend?
Yes. So my name's Dena T. I am the host of the Empowered to Heal podcast. And I am also an empowerment coach. I focus largely on working with mamas as well as those who have gone through trauma. And I feel so honored to join you today. Terry and I have been connected ever since we started our podcasts. So it's been such a beautiful friendship.
It is. And, you know, so I talk to a lot of women on the podcast who make pivots, right? And it takes courage, especially when it's something that feels out of left field for your family and your social circle. What I don't get to talk to people a lot, or what doesn't usually come out in the conversation, is kind of what is referred to as like the messy middle, right? So, you know, we get to know like the before story, like in the, you know, the moment that our lives kind of like took a change and we made that pivot, and how happy and satisfied and fulfilled we are now that we're I don't know, I would say living out my purpose. Would you say the same? Are you living out your purpose, Dina?
Yeah, I would say I am, but I still feel like I'm in the messy middle as well. So.
Yes, we are in the messy middle. Yeah. And so I thought we would talk about like, you know, like some of the things that people go through after they make that pivot, because there can be some grief, a feeling of imposter syndrome, but there's also a lot of growth. So I thought that's what we could talk about today, was all those juicy things that kind of are happening in the middle.
I love that.
What's sort of, well, let's start with grief, because I know we've talked about this a little bit before, just you and I, about that feeling of grief that you can experience when you leave something that is so comforting and so familiar to you. Talk to us a little bit about the grief that you experienced after you left your profession that you had been in for like 10 years.
Yeah, so I am a social worker, and I was an assistant program director of an outpatient mental health clinic, doing some really exciting work, working with youth and their families. And they were like the most at-risk youth in our community here in Maricopa County in Arizona. And in my work there, I had spent 10 years kind of really honing my skill set and being very good at what I did, at assessing needs and developing interventions, training staff, designing programs, developing programs. And I left that world. I made a really big decision this past February to say goodbye, because there were some things in my life that didn't feel right in doing that work. And one of those things was I believe that we all have the power within ourselves to heal. And that is not given to or owed to any external source. It's something that we develop, that strength inside ourselves. So when we're on our emotional healing journey, it's about what we learn and how we embrace life and go through life, move through life, adapt in order to heal. And working in a public mental health clinic, it's all about the clinicians you're assigned to or putting you in treatment centers, right? So I finally was like, okay, I've had enough. I'm just going to separate. And I wasn't like somebody who had all of my ducks in a row. I didn't say, okay, I've been doing this for 10 years. Let me start figuring out something on the side to supplement what I'm doing and then transition gracefully over. I just kind of said, okay, I know that I want to start a podcast, and that's all I know. And I jumped from being in a position of truly like knowing my craft, honing my craft, being a leader and in a position that gave me a lot of pride and fulfilled a lot of needs that I have in my life of being a helper and supporting people and feeling like a contributor to my house's income, my family's income. I jumped from that into a realm of complete uncertainty and learning. And I didn't know how to podcast. I was learning. I didn't know how to market. I was learning. I didn't know how to use social media for anything but connecting to my friends and family. I was learning. I didn't know how to build a website. I had to learn. I didn't know all of these things that I had to end up figuring out. And I'm still figuring out in this journey. And it puts you into this shock of like, whoa, how do I go from being here, very competent, confident, and feeling like a vibe in what I'm doing, to like being at the ground level of like learning everything and being responsible for everything. So that instilled grief, right? Like you miss the opportunities of like feeling confident within yourself, like 100%. feeling like you know what you're doing, right?
Yeah. And I would say my experience was a little bit similar actually, whereas, you know, I'd spent my life like probably trying to prove myself, if I'm going to be really transparent, like trying to kind of break out of this mom that was a teenage pregnant mom into somebody that could feel like she could be respected. And so, you know, each position I had, I just kept building upon and bettering myself and learning more and never missing an opportunity for growth in my field. And I got to that level. Where I felt like I felt good about what I was doing. I was a natural leader because I just cared so genuinely about people. And I love that so much. But, you know, in the corporate world, things are shifting. And I wasn't doing well with some of the shifts that they were making. I loved the company I was working for. I loved the people that I was working with and the people I was helping. But I couldn't stay aligned to some of the direction that they were going in. And I just felt like I was at this place in life where I needed to do something more. And I felt good when I made the decision. But then, you know, after you make the decision to leave and you're learning and you're struggling with some of the aspects of your new life, you do sort of like reflect back, and it always looks better in hindsight too. You know, I mean, that's just part of the story we tell ourselves. It was like, oh my gosh, that grass was so beautiful and green back there. But we all know, like, you know, the grass is never greener on the other side. But I started looking back and just, I did feel like it was like a sense of grief, missing that feeling that I felt every day when I walked into work. Like I was there for a reason. I was impactful. I was making a difference in those employees' lives, and they were making a difference in mine for sure. I mean, they filled me up. They filled my cup. They were like my family, my second family. And yeah, I mean, you go through that period of time and you're like, I don't have that now. And now every day is uncertainty, and there's a lot of struggle and a lot of learning. And especially if you're working at home by yourself as a solo entrepreneur for the very first time, you're like, I'm all alone here. There's nobody to bounce ideas off, except for now I have you. But for the longest time, you know, you kind of just feel like you're doing it on your own. And yeah, I think you need a really good support system if you're going to do something like this.
Yeah, I appreciate this dialogue because I feel like people need to understand that the messy middle is not something you can skip over. Right. And I know when we were talking about this a few days ago, we were talking about like people always show the end result. And they talk about like, oh, it was so easy. And I think sometimes we do that for show, and sometimes we do that because we forget. We forget the difficulty of what we went through when we're experiencing the highs of like where we've gotten. But every single person deserves to know, like, you're not alone in the messy middle. I don't know a single person in this world who didn't go through the messy middle unless they were like eating off a silver spoon, right? Like, had all the money in the world to like snap their fingers to have people do things for them or make connections for them.
Yeah, exactly. So what about imposter syndrome? Have you experienced imposter syndrome?
Yes. So imposter syndrome, I'm not new to it even prior to becoming an entrepreneur. So I really battled this a lot. I started kind of my podcast out with some discussion around becoming a mom and my postpartum journey. And my postpartum journey was difficult. It was overwhelming, and I had so much anxiety, and I had so many struggles with like intrusive thoughts. And I then went back to work as a clinician, providing therapy and leading teams on how to help people who had mental health struggles. And I was like, who am I? Who am I to do this? Like, what is going on in my own brain right now? And I battled imposter syndrome, and also learned at the same time that you can be both and, right? You can go through struggles and still be good at what you do. And you don't have to pick one side or another. And I'm relearning that in my job now, because now I'm like building online courses, providing coaching, doing a podcast. And I'm like, who am I as this brand new baby entrepreneur, right? Like stepping into this field as an entrepreneur. And I have to remind myself, all of my skills and accomplishments and tools and knowledge before this new title and role do not disappear because I've stepped into a new role. And I think back to a call I was on once in a group meeting where someone said, if you were a white male, you would have no problem claiming your accomplishments up until this point. But because you are a female, you do. You are a female, you question that, and you start putting yourself into boxes. Society does this too. And I was like, that's a really good perspective. Like, when I look at all of these really successful males in the world who have come so far, and they make it seem easy, and they claim things from 20 years ago in their bio of who they are and what makes them, I can do that too, right? Yeah. I am still that person who's done all of these things, and they still serve what I'm accomplishing today. So it's really keeping perspective.
Yeah, that is so true. So I can totally relate to that, because I feel like, even like something as maybe what would seem like unimportant, like sales skills. Like, I was in sales for years, and that translated into understanding what it felt like to be on both sides of the sales process. I was able to train people the sales process, but now I use that skill to relate to my audience, or to relate to the person I'm interviewing, and you're right. Some of those skills are very, very transferable and very relevant for what we're doing now, Yeah, I love that. I love that point that you made.
And I think we need each other to remind each other of that, right? Like, I'm grateful that I have you every week, and we talk at a predictable time, and I can be reminded of the things that I need to be reminded of to ground me for the next week to come. Because I can't just live in my own head, again, as a solo entrepreneur. It gets dark in there sometimes, and it gets confusing, and I start questioning what's my intuition and what's my fear, and I start questioning, like, is this my gut telling me that I need to like go in a different direction, or am I just overwhelmed? And having somebody to anchor with matters, and I think it helps beat that imposter syndrome. And I feel like we can get that in cheerleaders on the side of people who love us and are cheering us on, but we also need to get it in a way that's so raw, real, and authentic of somebody else who understands it that can like pull us back in.
100%. And I think you and I both share the philosophy about the importance of community.
Yes.
And I will never stop talking about it because I feel like it is so important for, I'm going to say women. I don't know, like I think about my husband and his social circle, and I think about the difference between that social circle and the female social circle. And I think it's different. I think we're much more willing to like talk about our feelings and be vulnerable with each other. And I could be assuming, I could be making some generalizations, but I really feel like community for women is so important in a lot of different stages in life. You know, like think about the baby stage, you know, when you were talking about postpartum, I mean, I'm sure you needed a support system. And then, you know, you've got the teenage years, you know, you're struggling to deal with all of the challenges of raising a teenager, and then empty nests, and then menopause. Like there's so many points in our life that we need support from other females that even our own spouse can't really provide for us. I mean, they just don't fully understand. They want to, I believe they want to, but they don't fully understand some of the things that we're going through and experiencing.
Yeah, it's community that you can relate to, right? Like
right. Yes.
I, as a clinician, as somebody trained in providing various modalities of therapy, I still experienced postpartum struggles, and I was confused by them. Everyone talks about postpartum depression. Everybody talks about the baby blues.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody talks about intrusive thoughts. Nobody talks about postpartum anxiety. They don't even screen for those things at the doctor's office. It's all about depression.
Right.
And interventions are all about depression, right? And
right.
I was like, what am I going through right now? And how does this relate to becoming a mom? Is this just me now? Is this just what motherhood is? Is this normal? Am I an outcast? And I suffered in silence. Because of imposter syndrome, I suffered in silence.
Oh.
And once I opened up around like, wait a second, like, no, this isn't normal. And I labeled it, I spoke about it in a podcast. People started reaching out to me and they're like, thank you. Like nobody, like, I needed to hear that. My wife, I made her listen to this and it hit home for her. Or
right.
like all of this feedback. And I'm like, nobody talks about it. So I started researching and I was like, I'm getting my butt into all of the support groups out there for postpartum seasons because I can't be the only one experiencing the anxiety. And lo and behold, there's tons. I did a survey in a few of my groups, and the number one symptom that everyone reported was anxiety. Depression was like third down.
Wow.
And so, but we don't talk about it. We, as parents, we're like, oh my God, this is just motherhood, and I think this is just how it is. And it's not. And so it's like finding the people you can relate to. Yes. That hold that place in their heart of like, yes, like we are not alone. Then we heal. But when we feel like we're the outcasts or the only one experiencing it, like we suffer.
Well, I think that this visual always comes into my head is like the flash mob, you know, like it's one person that starts it, right? It's one person that's brave enough. And if we can it's almost like if we can visualize that, like if you can be that person that's brave enough to put yourself out there and say, hey, I'm struggling with this. You know, in my community, it would probably look more like I'm struggling with these hot flashes. I'm struggling with insomnia and lots of anxiety and menopause as well. I'm struggling with night sweats. And if it's just that one person can be vulnerable enough to get out there and be the first one to dance at the party, then I think a lot of people will be willing to just like join in, right? Now we got a party. You know?
Yes. It's so hard to be that first person. Though.
It is hard to be that first person. Yeah. I wanna acknowledge Happiness is my day job here real quick. She joins every week and I appreciate her being here with us. She comes from, I just lost her comment. Pearl of the Orient Seas, she says, and it's morning for her, but she says, because we need empathy while undergoing the myriad of journeys in our lives as female humans. So I think she was relating back to our comment about females, you know, in friendship and in community. So yeah. But you know, what prompted this talk today was something that we said last week, and that's probably what our last little topic will be here before we jump into my fun new game that I play. But we talked about, you know, as we're sort of being that support system for each other, and as we're, you know, allowing each other and giving each other space to kind of lament a little bit about, you know, some of the struggles that we're going through, and how things aren't maybe turning out exactly the way we'd hoped. Like we've had some fails, like, right? We've fallen down a little bit. We've had to pick ourselves back up. And we feel comfortable doing that together. But one thing we also always do together at the end is, before the call is over, before we're done with our chat, is we acknowledge our growth. Mm-hmm. Because you don't go through something like this without growing, right? I mean, and I think that's the most important lesson to take away from this is the growth. So what are your thoughts on the growth that you've been through as you've journeyed through?
Goodness. Yeah, I agree. And I'm glad that we recap on growth. We also talk about, like, what are we going to do next, right? Like, okay, we've talked, we've supported, we've brainstormed on what are we committing to over this next week? And that's part of growth as well. When I reflect, like, growth doesn't come without difficulty, right? Without discomfort. I could have never gotten to where I did in my job, where I felt successful, without years of difficulty, without years of, like, living in the trenches of doing the hard stuff and understanding the ins and outs of the brain and behaviors and relationships and community and culture. And I had to live in that place, surrounded by it, in order to make sense of it and then be able to dissect it for others to be able to make sense of. Mm-hmm. And that came with understanding that growth is uncomfortable. And I don't like it in the moment. I push it away. I'm like, oh, that's uncomfortable and I don't want it, right? Go away from me. And then I'm like, okay, I need it. So I'm going to intentionally do one uncomfortable thing a day, right? So, like, force myself to build that resilience, but the ability to sit in discomfort without judgment, right? Yes. Without looking for the escape. Like, that is where the true growth happens in my mind. And it doesn't have to be torture, right? We're not saying to live in torture, but to recognize that uncomfortable things are challenging us and understand, why is it challenging me in this way? Do I like it? No. Do I want it? Is it going to get me where I want to go? Maybe. And if it's a maybe, I'm going to invest in the discomfort. If it's not going to get me where I'm going to go and it's making me uncomfortable, I might say, okay, no, I'm going to find a different route because this isn't resonating with who I am as a human and my goal. But I think 100%, like, being able to bring growth back, or bring the mindset of growth back after talking about discomfort, to kind of get us to the end stage there. Okay, so what are we going to do next with this now that we understand it, right? And is it resonating? Is it fitting us?
Well, and part of the growth, and let me real quick before I go into my next sentence here, I got to say hi to my daughter.
I just saw that.
She thinks I always say hi to everybody, so I'll say hi to her real quick. Uncomfortable things are challenging us. Quote of the day. Yeah, I love that too. Happiness. So yeah, I think part of the growth too is also just that level of self-awareness that just seems to just keep increasing. And part of that is knowing when you are outside of your skill set and when to kind of wave the white flag and ask for help. So that was what I wanted to add to the growth conversation. But have you seen me play this game yet?
I've seen you play it once and it makes me anxious. So I already have sweaty armpits. Let's do this.
So this is by Poddex. And I have a code for this. If you want to save 10%, just send me a message and I'll provide you with a code. But I think this game is so fun for, like, I don't know, parties and team building events, and, you know, maybe even with your partner to just get to know each other a little bit better, have some deep, intimate conversations. We're going to do 3 of them, and I'll throw the question out there to you for you to answer, and then you'll throw it back to me, all right? And I don't cheat, so here we go. I'm going to just pull a random one. All right. Are you ready? Mm-hmm. If you were musically inclined, who would you want to have a private jam session with?
Oh.
It's going to be a hard one because I don't think either one of us are big music people, right? Didn't we talk about this once? We both are bigger readers than we are music listeners.
Yeah, I think okay, I'm tossed between John Mayer and Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift, because I'm a Swiftie at heart, and
good choices.
She's so talented in so many ways. And John Mayer, I feel like, has some really
he's just so philosophical.
Yeah, but he has, like, this deep philosophical perspective on life that would be so exciting to engage around. What about you?
Okay, well, now that you brought in the swoon factor, I would probably say, like, Adam Levine. But I really would probably choose Tom Petty because my grandson is like the hugest Tom Petty fan. And if he could see his Mimi with John Petty, that would, or Tom Petty, not John Petty, Tom Petty, that would just make his day. So
Oh my God, that's so cute.
we'll go
Oh
with
my
Tom
God.
Petty. All right, here we go. Dina, we've already talked about this a little bit too, but I don't know if you'll remember this conversation. What would you do with an extra hour in a day?
Currently, I think my answer would change depending on my mood. I would spend it being fully and entirely in the moment with my family, somewhere that I love, without a worry or a care of anything else in the world, just being in the moment.
That's good. I like it.
What about you?
It's going to be hard to top that one, Dina. Anything else I say is going to make me feel shallow.
No.
No. So I was realizing this today, as a matter of fact, that sometimes like we can be, as humans, we can say to ourselves, like, something works so good, we just stop doing it. Have you ever heard that expression? Like you have a routine for a while and then something gets you out of the routine and then, all of a sudden these things are starting to happen to you and you're like, oh yeah, I haven't been meditating. I haven't been stretching. Oh, yeah. I haven't been going through my gratefulness list. It just could be a myriad of, different habits that you have that you kind of lose track of. But I think today I would probably say do like reading just for pleasure because I've gotten away from it. Like my life is so full right now of busyness and I don't know, like learning. I just feel like I've been working on getting my website fixed and I've been learning the Enneagram and I've just been learning. My brain is so full. I feel like if I could just sit for an hour a day and just read for just pure pleasure, that would probably be what I would do.
It creates such an escape in your mind.
It does. Since I was a child, like I've always felt that way. So, all right. Last card, Dina. You've gotten off easy so far, I'm going to say. This might be a doozy.
Oh, fingers crossed, fingers crossed.
Oh, no, this will be easy. Okay. What was the best boss you ever had and what made them the best?
What was the best what?
Boss.
Oh gosh, I don't know. I don't think I can pin it down to one specific person, but I could share a quality of a good boss that I
Okay, that's fair. I'll take it.
Okay, so I think what makes a good boss is somebody who cares about you as a person and individual, your individual dreams and beliefs, and promotes that passion that you have inside yourself and what you're working towards in a way that connects with what you're doing every day.
Love it. And mine is actually a person, and he has been my favorite person for many years. And I feel like he put me on a path that probably led me to exactly where I am today. And his name is Andy Dupay. So are you still there? Looks like our signal might be off. I'm just going to keep talking just in case we're still going here. But Andy Dupay, he was a great boss, a great leader. He encouraged me to stop just working for him and to kind of become my own boss in so many words. It's a long explanation, but I'll just say that. So yeah, I give him a lot of credit. He's a great guy. I'm still friends with him to this day. I actually just talked to him today. So yeah, I still have so much respect for him and consider him one of the best leaders I've ever had. And it looks like we lost Dina. So we were done with our 3 questions for the day. I just want to thank everybody for jumping on and joining me today. And you can always share this recording with anybody who you feel might be interested in the content. There's that little arrow down by the comment box all the way over to the right. If you just push that, you can send it off to somebody and invite them to join us. That little bubble in the middle, you can always ask any questions and they'll kind of hang out over to the side because sometimes your comments, they get long and I don't see them all as we're talking. But just thanks for being here with me. Thank you, Happiness, for always joining me. I appreciate you so much. And I will look forward to seeing you guys next week. So have a great week. Thank you so much for joining me. I I hope you enjoyed today's conversation as much as I did. If you'd like to continue the conversation, come on over and join our private Facebook group, What Women Want Today. I'd love to hang out with you some more there. Any resources mentioned in today's episode will be in the show notes. You can find me on Facebook and Instagram at What Women Want Today Podcast, or visit my website at whatwomenwanttoday.com. Please remember to subscribe, download, and share. Leave me a review. It helps other amazing women find the show and become a member of our community. One last thing for you today. You are not alone. You are worthy of love and a fulfilled life. Now it's time to go after it.